It has now been a few weeks since the release of Raging Roar in Fusion World, and enough time has passed for us to kind of get a grasp of what decks are doing well, what decks are underperforming, what's gatekeeping what, and kind of how everything has shaped out, especially now that we've got some tournament data, and we're going to be leading into a few tournament weekends now to get even more of that. With that said, I went live to talk it out with my chat to see what they thought about my thoughts about the current meta tier list. If you guys ever want to join, the links to that will be in the description. With that said, enjoy the tier list. Obviously, any good tier list, you kind of need to define what the tiers are. Z tier, top of meta, defines the meta, warps the meta. When you're deck building, when you're thinking about going into a tournament, these are the decks you're expecting to see most often. These are the decks that are most expected to do well. These are the decks that you're shaping your game plan around, knowing that you're gonna have to beat this. A are just solid decks. They can execute their game plan. They can win games. They just are the ones that are competing against the decks at the top spot, but don't warp the game in the same way and can expect good results from them. B are just decks that are like, they're consistent. They can do what they do, but they have some really like matchup swing one way or another, and they're just not super well positioned in the format. While Rogue doesn't necessarily mean that it's like worse than B and A, is that it's a deck that needs a very specific timing to be good. The deck can do what it does, but because of the way that the matchups are setting up in the meta, you need to time the tournament correctly to kind of see it through. I mean, we've got F tier. These are just bad decks. These are just decks that just don't do things very well at all. To start things off, top of meta. Goes without saying, Vegeta. High population size. High top cut representation. Tournament wins. If it weren't for the misplay in the UK regional, the finals would have been two Vegeta decks. So Vegeta realistically should have been in the finals and won that tournament. So high representation side plays incredibly well, super powerful. Not much to say there. Why? Because blue kind of does everything right now. It's got on curve removal. It's got infinite recursion. It has some of the best top end boss monsters. And if things don't go the right way, they've got Zeno to reset everything. And why does that make Vegeta incredibly powerful as well? It makes Vegeta incredibly powerful because even with a board reset, you can swing for 35k on the opposing leader. So it just puts you in a position where at any stage in the game, you're still in the game. And that's what makes blue incredibly powerful. Your Vegito SCR swings lots of times for lots of damage, can answer other 5-drops. You bottom deck everything. If you're out of range with your removal, you can use cost reduction to make your removal better. And I think that's one of the things that's really powerful is the fact that blue is so malleable. You know, with droids or with green, you know, your 4-drop Gohan can hit a 4 cost. There is no stage at which you can change the cost with what Gohan can hit. It'll always only be 4 costs. And because of that, it means that the removal is very linear. It can hit certain things, but if you're out of range of those things, you can't modify your turn or curve out your turn in a way to make up for that. The fact that blue has access to Mai to then be able to hit 5 drops, hit 6 drops, makes a pretty big difference on that front. And then with Haloku, obviously having access to Hercule to do it by 2. The other Z tier, droids. Droids are super good. Do they get any new tools? Not really. Not really. They're kind of still the same set 2 deck. Turns out though, the set 2 deck was really good. The thing about droids is that you have the split up game plan. You're a ramp deck that can play powerful threats like Broly's and like the double strike droids, but you're also a deck that plays 20Ks early between your Krillins and between your androids, your 4 cost, between your android 17s, between your android 18s, I mean. And then in the late game, you can go with more 20k spam and attack like 5 times with 20ks out of hand, mind you, not even just on your board, but also you can go with big bombs. So that kind of ability and flexibility with the ramp is incredibly powerful. Your leader's a 30k leader, which means you attack into all 25k leaders. And against base leaders, you're always forcing 2 cards out of hand. And then finally, the big thing that helps a lot is that your droids, your 4-cost droids are 4. Which means for your opponent to be able to Gohan you on curve, they need to have Vegito on board, which to be fair, they can't really answer Vegito on board without like curving off their game plan. But if you don't see Vegito, now it's like you need to sickle, which doesn't let you establish board as a blue deck. So the nonstop pressure with the cost thresholds that green hits puts it in a position to be really hard to deal with while also applying pressure. And the way that blue gets there usually is just by being the more aggressive deck. Where do we put Frieza? Yellow was top of format last set 2.5. It was kind of contesting droids, and it's kind of what was keeping droids in check. However, yellow gets worse because of the existence of red. Jiren existing completely walls out yellow. That matchup is horrendous. You can win, but it's not easy. We keep that in mind. It's like, all right, so my matchups got worse. The decks that people play kind of counter me much harder, and the tools I got weren't fantastic. Yeah, you got the Bobbity Spaceship and the Wicked Soul stuff, which is fun. I think they're a good route to go with yellow, but they're not phenomenal, right? Like they didn't feel like they changed too much to kind of hedge those kinds of matchups, and they didn't make your blue matchup all that much better. Especially since a lot of people are waiting away from the Ginyu package. Now you're a less aggressive deck altogether also. You end up in a position where, oddly enough, one deck didn't change all that much and actually remains top of meta. And then one deck, because of the introduction of what the other stuff has, actually gets worse. Because of that, probably B tier. Not even A tier, because A tier is kind of where those gatekeeper decks for yellow are really sitting for the most part. And that's kind of what a lot of colors are at the moment. Unfortunately, with the existence of Jiren, you're in a position now where you're either, and we can talk about Jiren. The thing with Jiren is that the way he's designed is a gatekeeper deck. He's not top of meta, but if your deck doesn't have means to be able to deal with what he's doing, you kind of just auto lose the matchup. And that's kind of where yellow is existing right now. So unfortunately, for a lot of decks, you can either beat Jiren and now you're kind of playing on this upper half of the tier list, or really, you can't answer what Jiren is doing and you just kind of get relegated below that. So it's tough for me to know where to position Jiren, because I think the deck is good, the deck is solid, the deck gets results. But like, if people were more adaptive with the meta, Jiren does nothing, right? Like, it's just like a slow red deck that can sometimes get there. Nevertheless, the fact that it's a gatekeeper deck and that it's getting the results that it has kind of makes me feel like he's kind of gets shoved in A. The deck is present, the deck is around, people are playing it, and if you're not the right strategy, like, you just can't claim being able to play up here if your deck doesn't deal with Jiren. But yeah, so the existence of Jiren really kind of puts it in a position where it's like, I don't know, man. Can you play ball with me? Great. Then you can hang up here. Can you not play ball with me? Then you're down here, dude. So we can talk about the set 3 leaders, and then we can just kind of like fill out the chart accordingly from there. Haloku. Haloku, I'm going to put in A tier. The only thing that's keeping Haloku out of Z tier is just the fact that, like, one, it's a harder combo deck to learn. I think a lot of people really don't balance correctly when you should be doing like the hard card draw plays of like girls with a short hair and stuff like that, versus when you should just be playing the tempo game. And because of that, because of its ceiling and the fact that it doesn't have the results you'd expect, I actually feel like Haloku kind of sits here. I think Haloku can play ball versus droids. It can play ball versus Vegeta. But because you're kind of stuck in this world where the deck has to operate on a certain way and you run more dead cards in the tempo matchup than the other decks, I feel like at the moment it's relegated with A. It's like probably like high A, like probably top of A, to be honest, just barely breaking with Z. Because of the way the deck operates, I feel just puts it like a smidge behind these two in my opinion. But Haloku, super solid deck, does what it does. The Satan City stuff, super powerful. Hercule to reduce cost by 2 so that your Gohans are even more powerful, super big deal. So really solid deck. Piccolo, holy bro. I'm gonna upset some people here. Piccolo's an F tier deck. The deck's just not good. I want to put it higher. I just can't justify it, dude. The game plan is super neat, but like, I don't even think there's a meta where you're like, oh, Piccolo's the sauce. Because guess what? If Piccolo was the sauce, you would just play androids. They do it better. Like, I think me putting out Rogue would be generous. The problem is that like your whole, like, Piccolo needed to be able to restand off of KOing a card or the leader, and probably also dropping the 8 cost requirement. Like, if you're able to give me that, then we're cooking with gas. But the fact that we're not doing that, and then like the androids can do the restand bullshit that you do, but better because they have like the Dr. Gero, is just kind of crazy. Maybe he is underexplored, but it just feels like even when he operates at maximum capacity, it's like you probably still just lose. I've tried playing it. I played quite a few matches. I tried with Saiyan ramp. I tried with the Kami ramp. The deck just doesn't get there. You lose to opposing other green decks because while you're trying to swing with your leader and not dealing damage because they can defend with like meteors and stuff like that, they're hitting your face with Brolys, and they're probably running more Brolys and more top end than you are. You're losing against any other color because they just aggro you and your anti-aggro options aren't good. So it's just like you are by far probably the worst green deck. And it's just like, and if you're trying to play like another green deck, the other green decks are just better. And that's the thing. There's not much to explore. The deck doesn't have an archetype. Like the Kami stuff isn't even restricted to being a Piccolo leader. So it's just bad ramp. So at that point, you're better off playing the other ramp So I don't know. And like Days of Training isn't searchable unless you're playing Krillin. Like the fact that Days of Training isn't searchable by the 5-drop Gohan is nuts. And the fact that there's nothing that brings his stuff together. So you just have a bunch of disjointed pieces. You need to run the Kami to be able to find your Piccolos, but your Piccolos aren't good if you don't have Special Beam Cannon. Also, Special Beam Cannon isn't searchable. So it's like, what are we doing here? This hurts because I want to put it higher, but I just can't, man. I just cannot justify putting Piccolo higher. Boo! I don't think Frieza is like that much better, because I do like that Boo is able to drop 4-drops like Goku or Frieza, and then end of turn still be able to proc off Babidi's spaceship. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of in the same ballpark. They're kind of playing the same game plan. Obviously, Frieza can do things like do Bulma loops and stuff like that. But if you're not playing 1-drop removal in this meta, what are you doing? In that same ballpark, I think Boo's just about the same, right? I mean, you're playing very much similar cards. You just get a free end of turn play, which can be a blocker, which oftentimes won't block and it won't really matter. But you're netting additional cards. You're netting additional combo. And you're able to use Babidi's spaceship for free. And then you got Candy also, which nets you additional draws. Yeah, I like Boo here. I don't think there's much else. It's like, it's a fine deck. I don't think it's a road deck. I think it's slightly better than that. We might still actually need a C tier, to be totally honest, though. So we added the C tier. The biggest thing for adding the C tier is that there's a few decks that probably are like just worse than B tier, but don't fall under Rogue. Because the thing with Rogue is that I don't personally categorize Rogue as being like, oh, it's right before F tier. To me, Rogue is like, it's a deck that works off axis that's slightly different, that like if you make a meta call will do really well. There's not a ton of those decks that exist in Fusion World right now, but like if we're talking Masters, I think like Janemba Mill is a Rogue deck, right? Like it's like if you can tech for that deck if you know it exists, and like it will do horrendously, but if you time the meta correctly, it can actually get big wins. Gogeta Ramp is a deck that I played, 100% a Rogue deck. Where like if you can time the meta just right with like the fact that like the type of removal people are playing and how slow the meta is, you can definitely get there. But like it is so swingy on being able to make a meta call that like that's where this deck lives. So like to kind of like justify that, Ginyu is a Rogue deck, right? Like how do I justify that? Like it's really easy to put Ginyu at F tier, but realistically, like let's say the meta was like all decks that kind of are going big but like aren't doing a bunch of removal. Like let's say the meta was all, I don't know, Android decks. Like let's say it was just this. Well, they're not removing your board on the first 3 to 4 turns. So like you can actually just establish like a super wide board and then go for the OTK. And like if they don't kill you, they maybe weren't, you know, like there's a world in which you can time the meta correctly for a deck like Ginyu to be able to get there. I think it's a balance of making the right call. And I'm not gonna lie, the fact that I put Piccolo under Ginyu is kind of a whole thing in itself. But that's how I feel about Rogue. I'm gonna put GT in A tier. That's because I think you can play ball against Jiren. I think the matchup is still kind of tough. But like GT specifically can turn his 4-drop into a 45k with the energy marker, which means Red's removal needs to work much harder to be able to get there. It has game against Beerus. Your curve is really good. Right on turn 2, you can play assuming you have the energy marker. On turn 2, you can play a 3-drop 25k. On turn 3, you can play a 4-drop that draws you a card. And then if your SS4 is able to live for more than 1 turn, you start being drastically ahead in the game. Bardock is a fantastic double striker that can remove anything off the board. So I like GT a lot. It plays game against this deck. It can play a game against these decks. The problem is that your black card pool is so limited that you just don't have a ton of options in terms of being able to warp the deck around beating anything. Like there are, I want to say maybe 2 good black cards I'm not playing in my black deck, and those are the only 2 other cards I could consider playing in my black deck to kind of make any one matchup better. So the fact that I don't have a lot of versatility in how I go into a matchup and I'm just doing my thing every game is kind of tough. But 10x Kamehameha, super powerful card. SS4, super powerful card. Bardock, really solid. The fact that your leader can turn the 3-drop Bardock into a 35k that swings twice, super powerful. So I think the leader is very, very solid. The only problem is the game plan is very obvious. It's very clear, and you can definitely play around that. So Bardock has more results than GT. But I don't actually think that it's better. Just off the back that GT can, like, because of his 1 cost, like his activate main, he's so much more flexible in terms of the ways that you can attack the opponent. But Bardock's really strong just off the back of being a 25k attacker that can also scry the top of his deck, and sometimes you get a 10k. But at the end of the day, it is effectively still just another black deck. It plays the same cards. You just run some density of Bardock to be able to combo for free. But at the end of the day, you still hit that same curve of SS3 into SS4 into Bardock. And if you curve out and your SS4 lives, it's super powerful. So at the end of the day, I think it's not as good as GT personally, but I don't think they're far off. I think they're very similar. And Bardock has results, right? And the fact that you're a 25k lead off rip means that you can like battle into this, means that you can battle into other cards much more advantageously. So Black's really good into green, but if you miss your curve, yeah, that's the only thing with Black. If Black doesn't hit curve, you kind of just lose, which sucks. But I think both Black decks super strong. So in general, set 3, I mean, really well represented. You're right. The blue deck, got the red deck, you got the two black decks. Yellow just kind of here, and then I don't know what they did with Piccolo. I don't think they play tested this guy. But overall, set 3, really solid impact into the meta, really solid placements all around. Some of the card pools that have, like some of the colors with deeper card pools kind of lead themselves better. And, you know, blue hasn't gotten a ton this meta, and green hasn't gone really a ton this meta. It's just kind of how the meta evolved around like this deck existing that has helped to be able to push these guys where they are, because aggro just isn't what it used to be at the moment because this guy exists. Yellow Vegeta, I think almost all the yellow decks just kind of live here. Like they're all super playable. They can all do things. They all have like some handful of results here and there as like a 1 or 2 of in a regional. I think they can play a game. They do their thing. Nothing too crazy. They just play the game. Red Goku is like what the definition of C tier. Like you could run starter Goku, but like why would you? Right? Like you could just do so much more with any of the other leaders at the moment. Broly. I think Broly is fine at B tier. Because of the top of meta, you're dealing with these two. Broly can play game against these two decks. The problem is that Broly's kind of slow, and like if these decks tempo you out, you're in a bad position. I still think the deck is powerful and can do what it does. There's an argument that it's C tier, but I still feel like a green deck that curves out well, and if you're kind of slow on your tempo, can just run away with the game. You can just charge their, yeah, and then you got the 7-drop Broly, which is super powerful as well. So I think Broly is like a solid B tier deck. Like, I don't think it contests really well against everything above B tier, but I think in B tier, like you could play against a Broly, and you're gonna have to be moderately smart against like what you do against it. U7, probably also B tier. The U7 cards are really good. You can still play like a good tournament of power arena deck, and get aggroed pretty hard, to be honest. Another one of those, you just gotta respect it. I don't think it does things that are as powerful as the decks out here, but it can tempo you out. It can play a bunch of really cheap 25 and 30Ks. But there's a lot of removal that's out there right now that makes it hard for U7 to be able to sustain a board. But the removal is still really solid. You still play really good red cards. The red cards are really strong. So honestly, any red deck can do really solid. The only reason that like the star deck is here is because like you're just not netting as much advantage as you would playing like any of the other red decks. Beerus is still super strong, man. I hate going up against this deck. The 4-cost Beerus that they got is so annoying, man. Bro, this card? On God? This card, dude. All my homies hate this card. I hate this card, man. I hate this card. So he swings for damage. He self-awakens. He's a 10k combo, and he plays a 5-drop that board wipes. Bro, I'm just so tired of Beerus, man. And part of Beerus being what he is also why I like GT more than I like Bardock, because GT has better game into Beerus because you can just make your stuff bigger. Keeps the board clean. The minus 10k is super powerful. Late game, it can still apply good pressure. It can play Jiren better than Jiren sometimes. Just as like a raw draw and like a big beefy 30k body. Like it's just a really strong color. Goku Black.
No, God, please, no.
I'm gonna say that Goku Black is a C tier leader. Probably the top of C tier. I want to say it just barely isn't B. I wouldn't put it in Rogue because I don't think Goku Black's a meta call. Because he's a crit leader, he's just not consistent enough to execute his game plan all the time. He gets more consistency pieces every set, but I still don't think that's good enough. Sometimes you just wall out Goku Black and it actually does nothing. But you also sometimes just lose to Goku Black. So like you need to respect it, but the consistency issues it runs into make it really tough for it to operate at maximum capacity. It's like literally the high roll deck. So you will sometimes just lose to it. Any like level of just like hand management, aggro management, and you're still like really in the game. And then because of how much like Goku Black oriented combo stuff the deck needs to run, it's not very defensive. So you can counter aggro Goku Black extremely easily. I'd say Piccolo is more consistent. Yeah, but even like Piccolo can high roll and still lose. That's the problem. Like that's why Piccolo's down here. Like Piccolo could have the best game ever and still just lose. Because like the deck does nothing for 4 turns, you know? Yeah, Rogue doesn't mean worse than C, by the way. Rogue means that like it's a deck that is either the absolute worst in the game or can kind of sneak in and position itself well with a good meta call. A deck that is sometimes amazing is better than a deck that is always kind of bad. Yeah, like this deck either feels like it's unbeatable or feels like it did nothing. But that's the thing, like Rogue to me are decks like Miljanemba, Ramp Gogeta from Masters. What's the Yu-Gi-Oh deck that like shits out a bunch of XYZs that like OTK you out of nowhere? Numeron, yeah, exactly. Like Numeron in Yu-Gi-Oh is like the perfect, like, bro, you just die to that shit sometimes. And like with the right meta call where people aren't running the right type of interaction to stop it from happening, you're like, all right, good, I guess you got it. And if we want to talk about consistency, give me a 1 in chat if you wish Cooler wasn't a crit leader and that he drew on his front side. I want this leader to be cool. His ability is so cool, but his ability is restricted to Frieza clan or energy. He loses out on not being able to draw, and he's not as scary as Goku Black on his awakened side, and he's got 0 support. The deck does nothing. He does have the core, don't get me wrong. Meta Cooler with the cooler core is really funny. It's probably better than Piccolo, but like this leader just does nothing, man. It just feels so bad. Like the amount of value that these yellow leaders get, and then this one just kind of like is in no man's land, is just kind of crazy. Nah, Piccolo would run over Cooler. Yeah, maybe 1-on-1, but I expect Cooler to win more matchups because yellow cards are good. Like you can still kind of just do a thing where you play 4-drop. Like you can just do a thing where you self-awaken super early and then you're just playing like Ginyu package, and the Ginyu package can legitimately still trump some of these decks. Trunks. Every blue leader, by the way, Goku Black doesn't count as a blue leader. Every blue leader can win by never awakening. We saw the finals of Eggman's tournament yesterday, and Vegeta won on his unawakened side. Guess what? Every single blue leader can do that. Off the back of Blue's good stuff being that powerful, both blue leaders end up in B tier, in my opinion. I don't think they're as... Oh man, there's almost an argument to have them here. I don't think these leaders provide all that much, personally. I love Trunks. I just don't think right now bouncing back 3-drop is where you want to be. And then Zamasu obviously like can like push that late game stuff. But like representation wise, they're not super there. But the blue good stuff, like you can do the things that this deck has done and this deck does without ever waiting. I just don't feel good putting Trunks and Zamasu in A tier, knowing that Haloku is at top of A and you know, this guy's here. Like it just does not feel like these guys are up to snuff to this. But any blue leader can do what these guys do. Like I'm not against the idea of like Trunks being at like the bottom of A tier and then like Zamasu being here, just because like on your awakened side, not losing your draw is a pretty big deal. We'll probably leave Topu for last since like post ban list kind of worth the discussion. Gohan C tier. It's fine. It hasn't gotten new tools really. Sometimes you can get there. The leader ability is kind of nice defensively, but like you're not well poised against this deck. This deck shits on you like so hard. This deck shits on you super hard. Like it just I don't know, man. Like there's almost an argument to be down here, but like Gohan actually can do more stuff than this guy can. But I don't think this deck's great right now. I think it's pretty bad, which is kind of rich when you consider like how far it's fallen since set 1. I just don't think you have the same longevity that Broly has. You're still a green deck that can do green things, and like your 3-drop. What's really neat is that your 3-drop Goku can deal with Jiren pretty well. So like your Jiren matchup is actually pretty good. But like you just do not have the tools to deal with tempo in like the same way that anything else does. It's just Broly's second flavor. It's Broly, but Broly's a 25k leader. And he ramps one for free, which means you're actually accelerating your Broly turn 1 turn faster. And then Broly has access to the 7-drop Broly, which is the 3-drop Goku, but like on more targets, and he's just bigger. Cell. So we have the Ginger Town stuff. It's actually pretty consistent now. And you usually when you get it off, you kind of just lose to like not seeing your bombs after you Ginger Town. I think Cell is pretty solidly in B tier. You will just lose to this deck sometimes. Like this deck can roll you like insanely. And the fact that they now have the 8-drop Cell that can like just board wipe you. Like, yeah, they ramp you to infinity, but it is a board wipe and it's a body that sticks around forever. It's better than I thought. It is honestly better than I thought it would be. Sometimes you do just lose because your hand actually does nothing. But like you have so many more consistency pieces in your 1-drops now to be able to actually draw into enough Earthling stuff to make it happen. The 8-draw actually, the new 8-drop helps a lot. 2-cost Hercule like to be able to like get like the fact that you can play 2 cost for Q to net yourself like 30k worth of combo, super solid. And then finally, we've got Topu. The thing with Topu is he got hit. Still pretty okay though. I'm gonna put him up here, but like don't mind this is because I want to pull up a card. I just think it is funny that they imagined Tournament of Power Goku needing this much support in set 3. Like imagine full power Goku while also being able to play him and play this so that we could play so that we can recycle our Keflas. Like they really thought that Topu needed this much support going into the next set. Is actually bonkers. Actually crazy. I think Topu's fine. You can recur your Keflas with things like glimpses, but if you don't see your Keflas, this deck's pretty mediocre. I think it's like C tier, top of C. I don't think, and this is with the caveat, I don't think it's a bad deck. I'm just not sold that like if you don't roll into like being able to do your Kefla plays, you're all that much better than what these decks are trying to do. Like if you're not finding Kefla, the best thing you're doing is like playing like a Gohan, I guess, for 1 energy into another Gohan, and you do that for 4, and that could be really like decent. Or if you have 6 energy, you can get out a Gohan and then do that before you go into a double striker. So the 1 energy to get out a 3-drop is like pretty solid. I'm just not sold that if you don't see your Kefla, it puts you in a position where you're stronger than what the rest of these decks are doing. It's still a red deck, right? Like it is still just a red deck. I refuse to put any red decks below like in Rogue or in F tier. Like I just do not accept that because like, and if you want to say that like Goku is better than that, that's fine. I just think the red package is so strong on its own that this doesn't really matter with the leader. Kind of in the same vein as to why blue's up here, right? Like these leaders aren't phenomenal, but the blue package carries them a lot. Red carries like any red deck. I don't really care what your leader is probably going to sit in C tier at least just because I like the red cards that much. So this is where you guys have the opportunity to maybe, and I really doubt it, I present you guys the opportunity to be able to fight for your leader now. Maybe you guys disagree with something and that's fine. I give you guys the opportunity to be able to say that I'm wrong about something and then I can tell you you're wrong back.